We have weekly webinar series. In this weekly webinar series, we invite the best minds from across the world to come and speak to us. As you know, the EGROW Foundation is a policy-oriented think tank. We believe in research-based policy advice to the government and to anyone else who would require. And because we're a policy-oriented research think tank, we make sure that the best minds from across the world come and join us and talk to us on most contemporary issues. We recently had two Nobel laureates come and speak to us. Last week, we had Professor Paul Milgrom, who's a Nobel laureate in economic theory, basically on auctions. He spoke to us. A week before that, we had a webinar on global hunger index, another burning issue that is there. So on most contemporary issues, we try to cover in our webinar series. Today's webinar is also designed in the same context. Recovery has started across the world. Even in our country, recovery is on the way. Of course, in Europe, again, there is an attack of COVID, but our country is smoothly handling it so far. In the post-COVID recovery, we thought what would be the role of the MSMEs. To chair the session today, we have Professor Bala Subrahmanya. He's from Indian Institute of Science from the Department of Management Studies. He has done extensive work on MSMEs and he has spoken under the aegis of EGROW Foundation twice, and we have invited him to chair the session today. I must introduce you and tell you briefly about him. He has been a professor for a long time in the teaching since 1996. And before that, he was associated with Ashok for a few years. Once he joined the academic world, he has dedicated himself to high quality research, which can be measured from the fact that he has research papers, about 101 research papers in peer reviewed journals, which is a very large number. He has books to his credit, he has book articles to his credit, and he has lots of research reports to his credit. He has done 133 invited lectures in international and national conferences. Given his expertise on MSMEs, we invited him to chair the session today. With that, I hand over the session to Professor Bala, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Charan Singh. I'm really delighted to chair this session on a very, very relevant theme for the country as a whole. As we all know, micro, small and medium enterprises, they are an indispensable and vital segment of Indian economy, and their contributions in terms of national employment, national income, and national exports are pretty well known. I don't think it requires a description. But perhaps no other segment of Indian economy is as diverse as this sector, maybe in terms of technology, in terms of firm size, in terms of entrepreneurial background, in terms of range of products, market reach, human resources. It is pretty heterogeneous and it varies from sector to sector and from location to location. Now, given this, meeting the needs of the sector, even in normal times, is quite a challenge for policymakers. But policymakers have been making attempts. Policy support has increased from one period to the other. And the sector also has grown in size despite all the constraints that the sector has been facing. And in fact, these constraints have become perennial, if you can observe. But unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic has emerged all of a sudden, causing severe disturbances and contraction of Indian economy during 2021, and it also has got extended into 21-22, at least partially. Now, while the average economy contracted, it has caused extensive disturbances in the MSME sector. Both demand contraction and supply disruptions played havoc, to say the least, in the MSME sector. The unprecedented reverse migration of labor from urban to rural areas would have impacted the sector pretty severely. So the policymakers responded very appropriately by extending particularly fiscal and monetary stimuli to the economy, including MSMEs. Now, this has provided the much needed relief to the economy, particularly to the unorganized sector, including MSMEs. Now, Indian economy is bouncing back, as Professor Charan Singh has already observed. Now, it is likely to get into its normal growth path, as the economic indicators reveal. However, the same cannot be said with respect to MSMEs. First of all, we are still clueless about the extent of damage caused to the MSME sector by the COVID-19 pandemic. Secondly, it is not yet clear how far the policy intervention made through the fiscal and monetary stimuli have helped the MSMEs. Now, given this, it is still a challenge to understand what needs to be done to enable the full recovery of the sector in the post-COVID-19 pandemic era. In fact, the sector deserves due attention for its recovery and for enabling it to get into its normal growth path. Now, it is against this backdrop that the present panel discussion on challenges facing MSMEs in the post-COVID recovery, organized by EGROW as part of their EGROW webinar series, assumes significance. We have 5 eminent panelists for this webinar, and it is my pleasure as well as privilege to introduce them and invite them to share their views on the subject. As we all know, the time is limited. Therefore, I would request each one of them to share their views to describe the key challenges in about 10 minutes of time. Now, let us first listen to the MSME entrepreneurs who are also association functionaries, and later we can hear from the MSME entrepreneurs themselves. Now, accordingly, first let me invite Mr. Kenny Ramanand, followed by Mr. Saigal, Ashok Saigal, and Mr. Subhash Chand Aggarwal. Later, I will invite Mr. Naresh Kumar Gupta, followed by Mr. Sandeep Kumar. Let me briefly introduce Mr. Kenny Ramanand. He's a public affairs professional, critical thinker, serial entrepreneur, and startup mentor. Now, Mr. Kenny Ramanand currently runs Springboard Public Relations, which is a leading public affairs and advocacy consultancy. He is actively involved in industry forums as the National Secretary for the All India Manufacturers Association, which is the voice of the MSME industry in our country. Mr. Ramanand is also a director with Vyoma Media, India's largest digital OOH company. He's on the advisory boards to a few management institutes and has been busy on the lecture circuit imparting knowledge to the next generation. He mentors select startups in the diverse areas like FMCG, artificial intelligence-based tech platform, and e-commerce. I have great pleasure in inviting Mr. Kenny Ramanand to share his views. Over to Mr. Kenny Ramanand.
Thank you, Professor Bala. Thank you, Professor Charan Singh, for giving me this opportunity to voice a few words. Is it possible that I share my screen? Can I do that?
Yes, you can.
Is this visible? Is my screen visible?
Please reshare. You have shared your browser instead of the screen.
Yeah.
Is this okay?
Yes, visible now.
Okay, so when I got this topic, which is the challenges that are facing the MSME industry in the post-COVID recovery, I did make a few calls to our members to understand what are the issues that they're facing. And I think these are standard issues. These issues have been faced by MSME members for a period of time, which is increase in raw material prices, of course, now higher freight costs, container shortages, cash flow issues, pending payments. These are all things that we already know. And these are typical issues from MSME members, like Professor Bala was saying, This has been something that's been happening over a period of time. Now, the impact in terms of varies from location to location and by industry to industry. So I can't really, unless I go into verticals of industries, I can't tell you how much of an impact it's actually made. We had actually done a survey about a year ago, and we had some details on that, but broadly, these were the issues. However, there were certain issues that got amplified by COVID, which is what I want to bring to the table. One was the ban on imports from China, which meant there was a shortage of raw materials. Most entrepreneurs did not have alternative technologies or alternative raw materials. If they had to produce new stuff, it meant they had to invest into new machinery and change their production lines, which is again high cost of investments. There was a credit crunch. There was an uncertainty of the market knowledge. A lot of people are still not clear in terms of government support. Though there are lots of schemes that the governments have announced, they're not worried. The MSME owners themselves are not too clear about it. Plus, business owners are a worried lot, especially about uncertainties. For the longest time, we've been saying that change is a constant. However, I'm just adding to that. Today, the rate and pace of change is unpredictable and it's alarming. And uncertainty is now a certainty. If we're talking about employability, people would get into employment because they thought it was very, very secure. You get into a job, you could be there for 30 odd years. My father worked in one company, which was ITC, for 35 years. So there was a sense of security. I'm not doing entrepreneurship because I want to get into a secure environment. 10 years ago, you could hop around, but still, you were still calling the shots. Today, people in the age group of 45 have lost jobs because of COVID. Lots of them have lost jobs, and they don't know what to do. I think the days of the cushy jobs are over. You're seeing the emergence of a new economy called the gig economy. And I think the gig economy, in a way, is a kind of entrepreneurship, but in the service sector. So for survival, it's not the jobs that are going forward in time in India. I think that the future of India lies in entrepreneurship. However, this particular last 3-4 months, right? This new set of challenges have cropped up, and it's unique. One, there have been changes in business models themselves. We never had this before. The adoption of technology has been exponential. People are now suddenly you're realizing you can do a lot more with technology, which you couldn't. So businesses which were not dependent on technology are struggling to come to terms with it. There's a high failure rate of entrepreneurship. Lots of guys are packing up because they don't understand technology. They don't understand the tech play. There's a fear of uncertainty of whether it's geopolitical, whether it's in Indo-China. Is this the end of the COVID virus? Is there going to be another wave? Will there be another virus? We don't know. Then there's the new technology stuff that's coming up, which is nobody has an idea about it. AI, ML, blockchain, whole lot of stuff. But for a common entrepreneur, he has no idea what we're talking about. He's thinking another new technology could probably mean a new app. But I was talking to a friend of mine in London last week, and he was mentioning they have a product which they're marketing it, which is AI for investments. So they actually crunch all the news, all the information of the 5-6 different stock exchanges, and they give you up-to-date information and suggestions, which is like basically broking. Now, would you trust a broker who knows limited knowledge of one market, which is the Sensex, or would you trust a broker who has the entire global knowledge in it? Suddenly, before you understand, change is going to happen so fast that one whole chunk of business will just go out of play. And as AIMO, as entrepreneurs going forward for MSMEs, this is what we want to address from a policy perspective. Because if you look at the entrepreneur's success story, 9% of entrepreneurs succeed, 15, 16, 17% kind of survive, struggle, whatever, and 74% of them fail. And what I want to bring to the table is what these entrepreneurs actually bring. They have a business opportunity, and if you look on my left side, they're actually paying. They have mortgages, they pay high rates of interest, employee salaries, ESI, PF, professional tax, GST, lawyers, chartered accountants. And if you look at the list of compliances, they're so long that you don't know whether you're running a business or you're running a compliance unit. They pay share capital, and if at all they make money, they pay income tax. No wonder 73% don't succeed. But in spite of that, let's understand this. MSMEs create and contribute over 32% of GDP, whereas if you look at the numbers for agriculture, agri contributes 18% of it. We contribute to over 41% of exports. Agri contributes to 17% of exports. We generate about 85 million employment for about 185 million Indians. And 220 million Indians are indirectly benefited from us. Now, if you're as big and as important as agriculture, don't you think we have the right to demand more from the government? Just look at these numbers. These numbers are alarming. The budget allocation for MSMEs is 15,700 crores. The budget allocation for agri is 1,23,000 crores. There's almost a lakh differential. It's 8 times more. And what I'm trying to say is that unless entrepreneurs themselves understand the power of what they hold for the future of this country and come together in large numbers, we cannot demand anything. However, from our side, we have a very small 7-point agenda in terms of what we want to push in terms of a plan or suggestions. One is we want to create a pipeline of entrepreneurs, because a lot of entrepreneurs are getting into entrepreneurship, whether by choice or not. They're getting into entrepreneurship because they don't have a job, so they're getting into entrepreneurship. So I think it's important that we do a whole range of education of these entrepreneurs. He might know his own business, but at the end of the day, he doesn't know marketing, branding, design, PR, advertising, finance, all the services around it. He doesn't know that this is what entrepreneurship takes. Now, here I'm talking about people from Moradabad, from Salem, from Dindigul, from Hassan, Hubli, Dharwad, everywhere. Not the English-speaking guys, not the guys who've gone to colleges in the big towns. Second, we want to create opportunities for entrepreneurs to exploit the global marketplace. I think today, if you take any entrepreneur, he's very happy selling in his neighborhood. There are opportunities today. For example, the Asian e-com market is about 2.8 times the size of the Indian e-com market. We want to showcase these kind of products into those markets, and probably the European market as well. Most importantly, an entrepreneur goes out, pays so much, taxes, GST, etc., etc., etc. When he fails, his house is gone. The bank is happy because they paid, whatever interest he says to pay is paid. Employees are happy because they've got the ESI and PF. Is it time for us to create a security net for entrepreneurs? And I think that is a big agenda we're trying to push. That is something that is very, very important for entrepreneurs. If I believe entrepreneurs have to try, fail, and come back and try again, we have to give them security. And this security need not be a dole. This security can come from like how you give your PF out to the government. Some part of it, let it go into a kitty, let it accumulate interest, let it whatever. And when you fail, at least you're not on the road. You have enough money to pay your EMIs. So that is going to succeed, encourage entrepreneurs to come back and try again. And I believe this is something that we're pushing the envelope on. We want to create technology and R&D banks for entrepreneurs. Today, most of the products that are made, you look at all the big unicorns that are coming out, are basically international business models that are being followed in India. We do not have tech products made out of India. I think in fact, if you look at the biggest scientists and their names, they would come from the government sector. Why can't we set up some sort of tech banks or tech engineering centers for, within on the outskirts of cities, so that people can come and create new technologies. Otherwise, we're just going to be following the big five, whether it's an Apple, or we're just going to be doing services for them. We're not going to break through. We need entrepreneurs to break through. And it's not going to happen overnight. You need to let them experiment, think, and encourage them. We want to do a series of unpredictable seminar series, which is basically telling people on the new technologies that are available, whether it's AI, ML, blockchain, 3D printing, whatever. Let people see it for themselves. Let them understand what is going to be the impact on entrepreneurship, on governments, on labor, and also educational institutions. Because at the end of the day, you need to make people employable. So let them come out and see it. We want to set up an Udyog Setu app, which is primarily an app for entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs like me, and I'm talking for about 80% of the people, we do not know what schemes are offered by the government. I should be able to register there and say that this is my kind of a business, and if there is a scheme that's available to me, it should pop up immediately. And finally, there is about 8.8% of people in this country, and that percentage is growing. Basically, people who've retired from work. They don't contribute to the economy. Is there somewhere where we can actually get them back to contribute to the economy? So we're actually setting up a center of RE, which is reskilling, re-energizing, reinvigorating, everything for a person to get him back and actually earn some money. Now we're thinking of actually setting up an incubation center, and we want to call something called a Reserve Bank, which is a bank where if you've retired, you can actually list yourself as a mentor, as whatever, for a commercial fee. It could be for a monthly, annual, whatever fee that you charge for your services, starting from writing a business plan to could be sales and marketing strategy to whatever it is you're good at. And if you're too expensive, you also have the option of companies pitching for you. If you're interested in their business, maybe you could take an equity in them. And if they hit $1 billion revenue, you could become a new. I want 60-year-olds to become millionaires again. Why not? And that's really our medium to long-term solution, is for the 10 crore plus entrepreneurs in this country. So what do we need? I think it's more than one organization, more than anything. I think it's to secure entrepreneurship in India and to help MSMEs. We all need to come together. It's time to realign, to relearn, to reinvent, to restart, and actually put our heads together and actually come up with workable policies and business plans, and not just some policies which sound good but are lost somewhere in Delhi. I mean, we across India don't seem to have access to most of it. So I think that's really what we would like to do. And thank you for giving me the time and opportunity. Hope I've stuck to my 10 minutes. You can always contact me on this WhatsApp or Gmail ID. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ramanand, beautifully bringing out the new challenges that have emerged for MSMEs and also suggesting concrete measures to protect and promote entrepreneurs in India. Pretty well done. I'm really happy about it. Let us now move on to the next speaker, Mr. Ashok Saigal. He's a member of the CIA National Council and the co-chairperson of the CIA MSME National Committee. He has been quite active in MSME policy discussions for several years now. Mr. Saigal was the SME member of the India-Pakistan Joint Business Forum and led the Indian SME side in discussions in Lahore and Delhi in 2015 and 2016. Mr. Saigal is the managing director and a co-founder of Frontier Technologies, and an SME specialized in the manufacturing of heat shrink products, mainly used for insulation in electrical power distribution systems. Mr. Ashok Saigal is an electrical engineer from IIT Kharagpur and obtained his MBA from the Harvard Business School. May I request Mr. Ashok Saigal to present his views and points relating to the challenges of MSMEs. Mr. Saigal.
Thank you, Professor Bala. Thank you, Mr. Charan Singh, for the opportunity to join this esteemed panel. To start off, I think I would like to quote one of the very senior industry leaders who shared with us a discussion that he had with the then Prime Minister, who asked his advice on what does industry really look for. And he said, we want only three things. So the Prime Minister said, what are those three things? And he said, well, we want ease of starting a business, we want ease of running a business, and we want ease of closing a business. The Prime Minister laughed. He said, you have asked for everything in your 3 points. So I think these are, in a way, summing up the challenges, many of which have been outlined also by Kenny in his discussion. And in this particularly, when he pointed out that there's a very large percentage of MSMEs that fail. Now, I think the innovation and entrepreneurship that drives MSMEs is something which must recognize this, and it does not adequately recognize it. The concept of a limited liability company has unfortunately been completely done away in India. Any entrepreneur who goes and borrows any money signs his life away, as Kenny rightly pointed out. And if he fails, he's out on the street because he's given his personal guarantee and everything is just taken away from him. The concept of a limited liability is that I am betting a certain amount of money on this. And if I lose that much. I don't lose everything. So there has to be this concept of limited liability has to be accepted very broadly by all financial institutions. And we do have some people, I think we have Mr. Aggarwal from the financial services side. I'd be interested in knowing his opinion and his views on this very controversial demand, so to speak, which I have made on behalf of SMEs. Anyway, coming to the challenges facing MSMEs. I think there was a question when the pandemic started that how are we going to survive? We survived the pandemic. We survived the lockdown. Then came the question, how do we revive the SMEs? So it went from survival to revival. And now I think we have reached a stage where over the last 8 to 10 months, we're looking at how do we grow the MSMEs? And I think this is the fundamental challenge which we all must address. And like they say, there are challenges, and in every challenge, there is an opportunity. I believe that is so because it disrupts our way of thinking. It forces us to leave the comfort zone of what we have been doing and to look afresh to see what are the other ways in which can be done, what are other people doing, and what can we do to take advantage of the changed situation. Because the only thing that is certain is that tomorrow will not be the same as yesterday. It never is. If you are static in today's fast changing world, I think 5 to 10 years is a very long term horizon. And in my company, if somebody comes and tells me that this is the way we've been doing it for the last 10 years, I said that is the first reason to question whether you're doing it the right way or not. I think the same sort of situation is what we are facing in India today. Kenny, in his various list of points, mentioned a ban on imports from China as something which MSMEs are complaining about. Now, again, this is a double-edged sword. The concept was that China is the factory of the world. I think that concept has been largely abandoned in the last 1.5 years. People are realizing that just like you would not have only one vendor or one supplier, you do not want one factory of the world. You need many different factories to diversify your sources from where you can obtain the items which you need. And here is a great opportunity to which India has taken much advantage. I don't know how many of you read the statistic a couple of weeks ago, which said that India is now the second largest manufacturer of mobile phones in the world. So this is the kind of disruption advantage which can be taken. I and CII being located in Delhi are perhaps a little more fortunate as an association in our ability to have a closer contact with the government. Mr. Ramanand has said there are a lot of government schemes. I agree there are a lot of schemes. And these schemes are quite complex and there's a long list of them. It's difficult for every entrepreneur to keep track of them. But it is the responsibility of associations like ours, like Mr. Kenny Ramanand's AMO, to be the channel for communicating these schemes to the entrepreneurs and helping them understand what can be done. As an example, we in CII got hold of Mr. Rajneesh Kumar, the previous CMD of SBI after retirement, and he was kind enough to agree to advise MSMEs. We had 4 different sessions, not all based on Delhi, of course, virtual sessions like the one we are having today, but with each of the 4 regions of the country. And each session was attended by something like 60 odd entrepreneurs. Mr. Rajneesh Kumar was kind enough to give us 2 hours of his time each time to give a half an hour talk on what is the outlook of a banker or financier in financing an SME, and then fielding questions and giving advice to the participants. So I think this is the kind of role which can be uh, played by associations. I would also like to mention, since we have a lot of people who are entrepreneurs and can act as a channel of communication, that the Ministry of MSME on its website has a very good list of all its schemes, and not and there are almost 100 schemes which are there to help entrepreneurs. But to pick out which are the relevant ones, which are the best to talk about, is what each one of us who are acting as representatives of industry need to do and take forward. Another great learning we've had in the last 2 years is to see that when we communicate with the government with a well-reasoned argument, the government has been extremely responsive. I think if 3 or 4 years ago, one talked of interaction with the government, one felt that they are high and mighty, they will not listen to us, and it's no use talking to them. They have their rules, and you can break your head against it. I think the last 2 years have shown us, and I think it should be something which should show everybody, and not just in industry, not just MSME, that the government is listening. And I think this is a big change that we have seen the last 2 years, that when you talk to people in the government, be they politicians, be they bureaucrats, there is a hearing given to you, which is a fair and reasonable hearing. As one of the previous additional secretaries mentioned, he said, having said that, you must recognize that we are part of a system and we have to move files. So the arguments which you give me must be something which I can put down on a file and justify. And also, he said, you must be specific. Don't tell us your problems. And I think that is true of the government. And it's true of everybody. They said, don't tell us your problems. We are aware of them. Tell us what is your proposed solution and how it will be better than the way we're doing things today. Now, if you give that, then one can make a convincing note and approach on why the system should change. We're seeing the system change. It is interesting, which I would like to highlight, that when the government came out with this emergency credit guarantee scheme of 20% additional working capital to be given, this scheme was meant to give you 20% additional working capital as a default position. You did not have to apply for it. The bank gave it to you. If you did not want it, you had to tell the bank, I don't want it, please don't give it to me. Now, having done that, it's interesting that out of 3.5 lakh crores that was allocated to this scheme by the government, after about 8 or 9 months, about 2 lakhs had been sanctioned. And out of the 2 lakhs that were sanctioned, about 1.3 lakhs had been actually utilized by the MSMEs. I think this reflects 2 things. One is that the amount of support was adequate, and B, that SMEs reacted in a responsible manner, not drawing more funds than they needed to, realizing that this is something which they would have to pay back. Here again, we heard at that time, and I frankly, and our association did not support this, as people said, the government has not given us something. They should have given us money. Now, I think that is wrong, because the money which the government gives is money which comes out of taxes which we have paid. I would not like the government to invest or give away my money unless they're sure that they can earn from it. And so providing liquidity through the guarantee scheme, that did exactly that. Now, whether you get money or you get liquidity, what you really need from the money is liquidity, and the government provided that. So I think the responsibility of industry is, please borrow, please take the money, but please realize that along with it is the responsibility to pay back, because what you're using is the nation's money, the taxpayers' money, and you have a responsibility to pay that back. So this is a responsibility which we must exercise. Um, Again, from our perspective, and I would just mention this because I'm not being a government spokesman, but I'm just sharing information. So please don't take it the other way. Is that Kenny mentioned about uh, technology support. The government has a scheme. It's not fully implemented as yet, but there's a scheme to set up about 100 tech centers throughout the country. And these will form technology centers which will provide the kind of support which MSMEs need as specialized support. It's something which in your area, if you have a good scheme, you can put together an industry cluster, approach the MSME ministry. There are funds available for it, and we should utilize that. Now, that is what the government is doing. I think the other part is what we are encouraging our larger members in in CII to do, that this larger members must act as supporters of their vendors to upgrade them. Mr. Kenny, you're located in Bangalore. I would recommend that if you have an opportunity, go and talk to Bosch. Bosch has done a super job in developing its vendors. And they continue to do that and support their vendors in a big way with technology, with management advice, and so on and so forth. Now, this is a responsibility which all of us need to do and not just look at the government to do it. There's another major thing which we always talk about is payments being delayed by the government, by large companies to MSMEs. And there is a demand that this should be made more stringent. Payment must be made in 45 days as per the MSMED Act. I have a bit of a take on this because I say be a little cautious because as MSMEs, we in turn have smaller suppliers and vendors. Are we willing to take the responsibility that we in turn will pay them within 45 days? And the answer which is often given is, if we get paid on time, we'll pay them. I say, hey, that's exactly the excuse the larger companies use when they don't pay us. So let us be realistic on this, that yes, this is an objective, but if there is a difficulty, let us understand and not just go running to a court to say this is the law and please enforce it. Because at the end of it, we have to survive together. We are part of that supply chain, and that's what we want to be. On the other side, the major thing which has happened as a challenge during the pandemic and which has tremendous benefits is the outreach of this kind of conference that we're having. The geographical outreach, which was earlier limited for MSMEs particularly to their nearby geographical area, those geographical barriers have disappeared. Products are being marketed through companies like Amazon, not only within India, but globally by MSMEs and even small micro enterprises. And the challenge of finding the customer, the challenge of getting him the goods, and the biggest challenge of getting paid by him is also addressed. So you can sell to somebody somewhere sure, in the surety that this intermediary will help you get paid. Similarly, the payment platforms like the credit cards are coming forward and joining us. Payment platforms like Paytm are enabling digital transactions to be done painlessly. So there's a lot of things which have happened in the last 2 years. If you look back to the situation 5 years ago and see what has happened, and you see what are the changes which have been catalyzed by the pandemic, I think on balance, we'll say we have learned a lot from those challenges. A lot of opportunities have opened up, and we've got to take advantage of it. I, as an entrepreneur, will say all entrepreneurs are always optimistic. I am very optimistic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Ashok, for the optimism exhibited. I do agree that challenges always make us learn new things and improve us to face greater challenges in the future. Thank you very much. I now request Mr. S.C. Aggarwal to share his views. I request him to confine his presentation exactly to 10 minutes because of the time constraint we have. Mr. Aggarwal.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I would like to congratulate to Dr. Charan Singh and his team from EGROW Foundation for organizing this event, challenging facing MSME in post-COVID recovery. And also, I would like to convey my thanks to EGROW Foundation for giving me this opportunity to share my views. COVID-19 is a pandemic that has caused much cost around the world. To control the spread of the virus in the absence of adequate remedy, cure, various countries worldwide, including India, went into partial or complete lockdowns. Compared to large businesses, SME have been hardest hit by the COVID-19 sectors like retail, hospitality, food services, entertainment services, and construction. SMEs after COVID faces various difficulties and challenges. As we know, during COVID-19, SME has been affected by various ways, like paralyzing their operations, weakening their financial positions, exposing them to financial risks, shortage of workers and production inputs because of distortions that marred supply chains, to pay employees' salaries, decrease in consumer spending. So, to respond to these challenges and take advantage of the opportunities, entrepreneurs need to be more resilient. Therefore, government support or public policy also plays a crucial role in encouraging small businesses, resiliences, and creating a more inclusive and sustainable growth. The crisis is an unexpected event, and the key is to act quickly to implement responses. Firms or businesses delivered in their responses, while some opted for a retreat strategy like a distressed sale of assets, taking new debts, laying off employees, which in the long run cause undermine the competitiveness of the enterprises. Others acted in a more resilient manner, which includes taking into account the new needs of the customer, moving to online channels for sales in case of supply chain disruptions, sourcing from new suppliers. Resilient and agile approaches are pro-competitive approaches and ensure that a business can weather the storm in as good shape as before or even stronger. The COVID-19 crisis has caused behavioral changes which affect entrepreneurship and particularly SMEs. SMEs are navigating through the crisis through their creativity and innovation. Their capability to respond to these changes depends on the entrepreneurship resilience to continue with creative and innovative ideas and government growth-oriented economic policy. Mr. Ashok Saigal has asked me to say about, he has said banks and institutions are asking for unlimited liability when giving loans. If so, that should be limited liability should be there. So I can say one thing: if that would be there, then banks' comfort would be lesser to funding the SMEs. Even today, banks are not very comfortable without taking adequate collateral security and giving loans. And these are the some general problems which SMEs are facing. Lack of capital due to inadequate access to finance and credit, inability to attract talent and tech-savvy manpower, poor infrastructure and utilities resulting in low production capacity, lack of innovation, technology and digital knowledge gap, lack of working marketing know-how. So these are general SMEs are facing. These are the general challenges, and even challenges like finding customers, increasing transaction cost, building an email list, brand awareness, lacking of brand awareness, lacking of lead generation techniques, delight customers, hiring talented people, managing workflow, financial planning, scaling. These are the challenges. So after post recovery, though, organized SMEs now started doing very well. Our GST collection is above 1 lakh crore normally for practically last 12 months. And SME is doing good job. Even our credit growth by banks are increasing. So government is providing, has provided full support, even RBI, central government, state government, and even international NGO, local NGO, they have acted very good while COVID times, and now still government is coming out various packages for SMEs, and I think ease of doing business is required. And what are the challenges? So government has to do work on all these challenges and make things simple for SMEs. They can do their business. um Tax problems should not be there, because sometimes SMEs are not able to handle their tax problems. So government should be lenient and make for them very easy tax compliance, so that they can put their attention towards business. And I think uh, uh, this organized SME is doing very well and will do better in time to come. And it's a very good seminar. And my predecessor speakers, uh, Mr. Ashok, Saigal, and Mr. Kenny has spoke very well and clarify most of the things. So I conclude here. And once again, I must say thanks to EGROW Foundation and Dr. Charan Singh for giving me a chance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Subhash Aggarwal. Mr. Subhash Aggarwal is the chairman and managing director of SMC Group. He's a senior member of the ASSOCHAM Managing Committee. I missed that. I'm extremely sorry about it. Mr. Aggarwal actually made reference to the supportive policy measures extended by the government and how the sector is actually responding positively to the supportive measures of the government. I now request Mr. Naresh Kumar Gupta, who is the CEO of Fun Zoo Toys India, based in Greater Noida. That is Gautam Buddha Nagar district of UP. Let me briefly introduce him. After completing his master's degree from Delhi University, he started his career in the Sri Ram Institute for Industrial Research as a research analyst, but he soon entered into the industry field. He started manufacturing plush toys in 1979. Initially, the business was started from a small room, but gradually it increased from micro level to become a small enterprise. So I request Mr. Naresh Kumar Gupta to throw light, to reveal his perspective with respect to the challenges faced by the MSMEs in the post-COVID era. Mr. Naresh Kumar Gupta.
नमस्कार। सबसे पहले तो मैं सरदार चरण सिंह जी का बहुत ही हृदय से आभारी हूँ कि आपने इतने बड़े हाईली रेप्यूटेड पैनलिस्ट के साथ में मेरे को एक बोलने का मौका दे रहे हैं। आई एम रियली थैंकफुल टू यू एंड ऑल दिस ग्रुप। मैं चूंकि टॉय इंडस्ट्री से रिलेटेड हूँ, इसलिए मैं एमएसएमईज जो चैलेंजेस फेस कर रही है उसके लिए मैं अपनी टॉय इंडस्ट्री का एज ए एग्जांपल आपको ध्यान कराना चाह रहा हूं। मैं सर, I am in this toys manufacturing since last 40 years. 1998 तक हमारे यहाँ पे इंडिया में कोई challenges नहीं थे। You might have heard the name of Raja Toys. I think हम सब इतने छोटे थे कि राजा टॉयज, माया टॉयज, टीना टॉयज, ये सब बहुत अच्छे अच्छे मैन्युफैक्चर हुआ करते थे। लेकिन 1998 के बाद से जब से हमारी पॉलिसी लिबरल हुई और कस्टम ड्यूटी जो पहले 50% हुआ करती थी उसको लिबरल पॉलिसी के कारण से इसको 20% कर दिया और 20% से भी नीचे लेके आए बिकॉज ऑफ आसियान एग्रीमेंट। उसकी इफेक्टिव कस्टम ड्यूटी रह गई 11%। लेकिन जो टॉयज के अंदर जो रॉ मटेरियल यूज हुआ करते थे उसकी ड्यूटी हो गई ज्यादा, यानी 40% हुआ करती थी। तो हुआ क्या, हमने एक 2002 में एक ग्रेटर नोएडा में काफी बड़ी लैंड ली हमने, मोर देन 100 एकर्स, और उसके अंदर हमने टॉय सिटी एक क्लस्टर बनाया और वो बहुत सक्सेसफुल होने जा रहा था। जैसे ही ये पॉलिसी लिबरल हुई, सब इंडस्ट्रीज अपने प्लॉट बेच के और वहां से चाइना से माल इंपोर्ट करना शुरू कर दिया। जो राजा टॉयज, टीना टॉयज और माया टॉयज, जो अच्छे अच्छे ब्रांड यहाँ पे थे और अच्छी अच्छी यहाँ पे मैन्युफैक्चरिंग थी, और उस समय 2002 की मैं बात कर रहा हूँ, उनके यहाँ पे 100-150 एम्प्लॉइज हर एक इंडस्ट्रीज में काम कर रहे थे। जस्ट बिकॉज ऑफ लिबरल पॉलिसी यहाँ से सारी इंडस्ट्री वाइप ऑफ हो गई, और हमारा जो टॉय सिटी का क्लस्टर था जिसमें 150 से ज्यादा एप्लीकेंट जिन्होंने इंडस्ट्री लगाई थी, सब ने वाइंड अप करके चाइना से इंपोर्ट करना शुरू कर दिया। लेकिन जैसा कि हमारे प्रवक्ता जो बाला सुब्रमण्यम जी ने और अशोक सिंघल जी ने भी ध्यान कराया कि गवर्नमेंट अब सुनने वाली है, तो मैं बीइंग ए कन्वीनर ऑफ टॉय एसोसिएशन ऑफ इंडिया, हम एक प्रपोजल लेके गए कि भाई यहाँ पे कस्टम ड्यूटी रॉ मटेरियल की ज्यादा है, उसको कम करना चाहिए, फिनिश टॉयज की ज्यादा होनी चाहिए। तो वो सुनवाई हुई, और जस्ट लास्ट ईयर्स यानी 2019 में इसको इन्होंने रिवर्ट बैक कर दिया, यानी ड्यूटी कर दी 60% टॉयज के ऊपर और रॉ मटेरियल पे कम कर दी। तो एक हमें एक लेवल प्लेइंग फील्ड हमें मिला। लेकिन उसके साथ साथ जैसा कि अपने अशोक सिंघल जी ने भी ध्यान कराया कि भी गवर्नमेंट अब कहती है कि भी हमें प्रपोजल दो, क्या सुझाव क्या है तुम्हारे। तो मैंने भी एक प्रपोजल दिया कि टॉय इंडस्ट्रीज को अगर हमें आगे लेके जाना है और इंटरनेशनल ग्लोबल मार्केट के अंदर हमें टॉयज का शेयर बढ़ाना है, चाइना से इंपोर्ट कम करना है, तो हमें एक टॉय डिजाइन डेवलपमेंट इंस्टीट्यूट चाहिए। उसका बहुत अच्छा प्रपोजल हमने तैयार कराया। उसकी लैंड भी हमने जब टॉय सिटी ग्रेटर नोएडा में बनाई तो 20,000 मीटर हमने उस समय लैंड लेके, आज भी वो खाली लैंड पड़ी है। तो हमने उनको प्रपोजल दिया और डीपीआर सारी बनाई, डीपीआर भी अप्रूव हो गई। और इवन एक मेरे को बहुत अच्छा मौका मिला, पार्लियामेंट के ऊपर टॉयज के ऊपर एक कमेटी बनी हुई है। लास्ट ईयर मुझे उसके अंदर भी जाने का मौका मिला, और मैं उसके अंदर बोला भी कि हमें कुछ नहीं चाहिए, ना हमें कोई सब्सिडी चाहिए, हमें तो केवल एक टॉय डिजाइन डेवलपमेंट इंस्टीट्यूट दे दीजिए, जिसके अंदर हम स्किल डेवलपमेंट करेंगे, हम R&D करेंगे, हम टेक्नोलॉजी को इम्प्रूव करेंगे, और वहाँ पे जो जो भी चीजें हमें चाहिए इंडस्ट्रीज के लिए वो सब वहाँ पे अवेलेबल होंगी। तो लेकिन अब हो क्या रहा है कि भी वहाँ पे जो MSME में 1-1.5 साल से मैं इसको फॉलो भी कर रहा हूँ, लेकिन वहाँ पे टाइम शेड्यूल प्रोग्राम नहीं बन पा रहा कि टॉय डिजाइन इंस्टीट्यूट जिसकी लैंड भी पड़ी है और जिसको वन टाइम लीज रेंट भी हमने पे कर दिया, वो आज तक भी डेवलप नहीं हो पा रही। तो मेरा कहने का मतलब ये है कि चैलेंजेस जो हमें इस समय फेस कर रहे हैं, हमें कुछ नहीं चाहिए, हमें केवल R&D दे दें। जो भी इंडस्ट्रीज है यहाँ पे, चाहे वो अपरेल्स की है, चाहे वो टॉयज की है, चाहे वो और भी दूसरी फील्ड्स में है, हमें एक R&D सेंटर अगर दे दें जिसके अंदर टेक्नोलॉजी से होंगी, हम नए नए इनोवेशंस करेंगे, और जब ये सब चीजें होंगी तो हमारी बाकी छोटी छोटी समस्याएं जो है, चाहे वो फाइनेंस की भी है, आजकल फाइनेंस में जैसा और भी ने कहा कि भी लिक्विडिटी, कोलेटरल लिक्विडिटी मांगते हैं बैंक, नो डाउट उसको भी हम डे बाय डे रिड्यूस हो रही है। तो मैं ये चाहूंगा कि भी इन चीजों में हमें अगर R&D और टेक्नोलॉजी डेवलपमेंट इंस्टीट्यूट मिल जाएंगे तो हमें बहुत अच्छा रहेगा। और जो चैलेंजेस मैं समझ पा रहा हूँ, आज आप ये देखिए, हमें एक डाटा भी हमें तैयार करना पड़ेगा कि टोटल MSME इस इंडिया में है कितने, और कितने जो स्कीम्स गवर्नमेंट फ्लोट करती है कितने उसको अवेल कर रहे हैं। तो हमें पता लग जाएगा कि भी ये जो इतना बड़ा गैप है, कितने MSMEs है, कितने अवेल कर रहे हैं, बहुत ज्यादा गैप जो है वो क्यों है, क्यों नहीं उसको अवेल कर पा रहे। ये बहुत बड़ा, जब इसको देखेंगे कि भी क्यों नहीं अवेल कर पा रहे, तो हमें इसके अंदर इसकी रेमेडी अपने आप नजर आएगी कि भी पॉलिसी को हम वर्कशॉप करें या और भी कुछ चीजें इसमें इंस्पायर करें इंडस्ट्रीज को। और इसके साथ साथ एक हमें गवर्नमेंट को हम ये भी चाहेंगे कि भी एक बहुत नॉमिनल अमाउंट, चाहे वो ईयरली हो, 0.01% एक R&D के अंदर जितने भी MSMEs हैं वो मैंडेटरी कर दें। एक कॉर्पस फंड इसका क्रिएट हो जाएगा, और उसी के अंदर चाहे वो लीन मैनेजमेंट है, चाहे वो इनोवेशन है, चाहे वो डिजिटाइजेशन है, सब चीजें वहीं से फंड आए, और बहुत नॉमिनल अमाउंट हम पे कर सकते हैं, चाहे वो EMI की फॉर्म में है या ईयरली जो सोशल रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी जैसे फंड हम क्रिएट करते हैं, ऐसे MSMEs का एक फंड वहाँ पे बनाया जा सकता है। और रेगुलर हमें R&D करने के अंदर फोर्स किया जाए और टेक्नोलॉजीज अपग्रेड करने के लिए दिया जाए, और उसके साथ साथ एक्सपोर्ट के अंदर जो बेनिफिट हमें देती है गवर्नमेंट, उसको भी थोड़ा सा लिबरल किया जाए। तो मैं समझता हूँ कि जो चैलेंजेस हमें पोस्ट कोविड आ रहे हैं, जो हमारा जैसे अब बाहर निकल के आ रहे हैं और इकोनॉमी ग्रो कर रही है, तो हमें बहुत अच्छा एक यहाँ पे इस तरह का एटमॉस्फेयर मिल जाएगा, तो वी विल बी एबल टू सर्वाइव एंड वी विल एबल टू ग्रो। थैंक यू सर।
Thank you, Mr. Gupta. If I have understood him correctly, I think he has emphasized on the role of R&D and innovations in the MSME sector in particular in the toy sector for the benefit of the nation as a whole. I fully agree with him. I now request the last speaker, Mr. Sandeep Kapoor, who is the chairman and managing director of Sri, that is the brand name of the under which the products are sold. He has experience to the extent of almost 3 decades in the field of garment and textile industry. Mr. Kapoor brings an encyclopedia of knowledge coupled with the necessary entrepreneurial drive to bring forth a real change in the Indian garment industry today. He brings to the table his vast understanding of designing, manufacturing, merchandising, sourcing, and procurement in the garment and textile domains. I'm sure Mr. Kapoor will be able to throw light on the problems of the sector, particularly with respect to the recovery of the sector in the post-COVID era. Mr. Sandeep Kapoor.
Thank you, Mr. Bala. Thank you, Mr. Charan Singh. Thanks for inviting me on this forum, and very knowledgeable. I listened to Mr. Kenny. Very valuable thoughts. In fact, what I wanted to say, he has already described it in a very professional manner. So, as very rightly said by Mr. Kenny, and although government is taking a lot of steps to support MSME, but I think these are not enough. I think the size what we are talking about the MSME today. So I don't know how many people are unregistered today. You will be endless. So I was reading somewhere it is about the total count of registered MSMEs are 6 crore plus. So I know a lot of people who are still unregistered in MSME and they don't know about that scheme. So we are sitting on a country of entrepreneurs, and I think their requirement, their problems are needs to be addressed. And if we talk about the opportunity, we are sitting on the mountain of the opportunity after this pandemic, especially when a lot of countries are not willing to buy from China, and we have the opportunity to capture that business. So we definitely need a support from the government so that we can effortlessly we can smoothen our business, we can grow our business, we can grow exports. So there are a lot of challenges right now. So there are a lot of areas we have already discussed, and of course there's a financial solution lacking. We don't get finances without collateral. We are paying higher interest rates, which are not supporting to our business, and the margins are not those high that we can afford those high rate of interest. So if I talk about the textile industry, there has no been encouragement from the government to support textile industry. Post pandemic, we have seen steep hike in the raw material prices. 3 years back, when GST was implemented in the country, that time also there was a substantial increase in the raw material prices, the chemical prices, because what I understand as an entrepreneur, earlier there was a excise duty on the yarn and fiber and the weaving stage, so which now being saved at the back end. So when the government implemented the GST, we were paying over and above that cost, so that benefit was not passed on to the industry. Now we are hearing that from 5 and 12% slab to we are going to 12% on the overall garment GST structure, which is again very high. So if you talk about some of the products, we don't have even margin more than 8 to 10%. So customer is not willing to pay 12% GST price on that. So these are the hurdles what we are facing in this industry, and our industry is the second most impacted industry due to pandemic. So if we talk about there are so many challenges like business innovation नहीं है, customer experience नहीं है, manpower का problem चल रहा है, processes ने outdated है, slow हैं, then lot of compliances. My half the time is gone through. We have a special team to make our compliances on time. GST hai, ESI hai, PF hai, everything is so complicated. So most of our time goes into all these things, not into developing our business. So so my idea is as Mr. Ashok Singhal very rightly said, government at least listening. Very true. But now the time is the government has to act too. So that's very important, especially at this time. And there are so many problems for our industry. For example, there have been no dedicated market areas where we trade. We are selling online, but we need to trade also, because India still has a touch and feel market where customer comes to. For example, Delhi is a trading center, and a lot of customers from other states come to Delhi. They like to buy the merchandise. They want to touch and feel, but we don't have any dedicated markets or infrastructure to invite them to the market where can they compare the product with the different manufacturers. Or I mean, we 3 years back we had a sealing drive from the government in Delhi. So most of the market has been sealed, but without providing any alternate space to trade their business. So I think, as per my knowledge, about 3,000 establishment has been closed, whereas every establishment was, employing at least 40 to 50 employees. So what about that? So government could easily have thought of something, to relocate them. Where can they establish their business? They can, shift their base there. So these things are really, really required from the government. As per my experience, I'll just share my experience with you for the China market. So I had a opportunity to go to China. There was, very clustered market. And about 10 years back, when I went there, there was a absolutely organized, air-conditioned market where you have the, all the different sections for toys, for stationery, for. So I was shocked to see what this can be done in India also, because India is a big market. We have to make them grow. So that's my suggestion. And as Mr. Saigal was talking about the MSME loans, so I think the loans were given in a very small quantum, but uska ask bahut bada tha. It was a mismatch between requirement and the dispersal. And for your information, we had got some loan against collateral, against a very, very high rate of interest. It was not given without collateral, what government has said. I don't know, there's a miscommunication between government and the bankers. So that's my only concern. So I again request you that we are again sitting on a mountain of opportunity. Let's get that. Let's explore that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sandeep Kapoor. I fully agree with your observations. In fact, you have made reference to the positive response that we are getting from the government, but you feel that something more needs to be done, particularly in the field of finance and marketing. We hope that the policymakers will really listen to the needs of the sector and they will respond positively more impressively in the future. Maybe throw open this session for questions from the participants. We can have a couple of questions for about 10 minutes at least before concluding the session.
Thank you.
I would request the participants to raise questions to any of the 5 panelists. Feel free. Maybe I will take the initiative. What has been not mentioned is with respect to the unorganized sector. Perhaps none of you is from the unorganized sector. That's why that particular aspect actually has not been touched upon, not at least directly, because it is the unorganized sector which would have got affected much more than the organized sector. And in fact, in major parts of urban India, unorganized sector has virtually got wiped out. And of course, with the return of these labor force from rural to urban India, some of them are getting into business. But the challenges still remain. I really do not think they have recovered fully, particularly because many of them do not have any permanent location. They have been wiped out completely. So I would like to request some of you to respond to this. What should be done? And also the rate at which the unorganized sector gets transformed into the organized sector. It's also, I think, no specific statistics are available, but the need of the hour is also to encourage more and more unorganized enterprises to become part of the organized sector. And the GST, of course, would have played some role, but still, I feel we have a long way to go. I would request particularly Mr. Kenny Ramanand to respond to this particular issue.
Thank you, sir. We had actually done a survey probably in May, June this year, going across different sectors and especially the unorganized sector. And I don't have the numbers with me right now, but we had actually predicted that about 35% of outlets in the unorganized, especially from the unorganized sector, would take a big hit and they might even shut down. Now, when we're talking about MSMEs and micro enterprises and unorganized sector, MSMEs just form less than 2% of the whole base of about 100. So yes, unorganized sector is a big issue, and how they managed it has been a wonder, number one. Number two, we are also talking to a couple of labor ministries in state governments. We are suggesting the idea of putting up Shram Bhavans, which is when migrant labor comes to a particular district and you want to create workforce there and you want to create development in those districts, one product, one district kind of a thing. I think they should provide low-cost housing for migrant labor, which is at a very low fee, maybe 5 rupees, 10 rupees a day, but hygienic place and a secure place. So once that place gets developed, you start moving that around. So we are actually talking to a couple of state governments in the south who have found that idea very interesting to help migrant workers. That's really what we're doing.
Yeah, the other issue that please, Mr. Gupta.
मिस्टर बाला, जो आपने पूछा है अनऑर्गेनाइज से ऑर्गेनाइज में कैसे लाया जाए, तो एक सजेशन मेरी है कि भी जो जगह अनऑर्गेनाइज के पास फाइनेंशियल कंस्ट्रेंट काफी ज्यादा रहता है, तो अगर एक सेंट्रल की पॉलिसी ऐसी बने कि जो प्लग एंड प्ले इंडस्ट्री बन जाए, यानी लैंड भी गवर्नमेंट प्रोवाइड कर रही है, बिल्डिंग भी सब विद कंप्लाइंट फैक्ट्री प्रेमाइसेस, और वहां पे उनसे कोई एक नॉमिनल लीज रेंट लेके, वेदर इट इज मंथली और ईयरली, तो उनको अगर अनऑर्गेनाइज्ड को बनी बनाई फैक्ट्री और उसमें सारी कंप्लायंस होगी, फायर का भी, पोल्यूशन का भी, वेस्ट मैनेजमेंट का भी, तो आई थिंक अनऑर्गेनाइज्ड विल डेफिनेटली कम इनटू ए ऑर्गेनाइज्ड सेक्टर. दिस इज माय सजेशन.
Sir, if I might come in, Professor Bala, जो गुप्ता साहब ने कहा, he's made a very, very valid point. Okay, the complexities of dealing with the systems in the organized sector is what prevents a lot of people from coming into the organized sector. So there are two sides of this. One is the ease of doing business. And I think somebody mentioned, no, maybe another discussion. You see, it's surprising that one of the things in which India scores very poorly in terms of World Bank rankings of ease of doing business is the ease of paying taxes. Now, one cannot imagine why the government would not make it easy to collect taxes, why it would make it difficult to pay taxes. The second thing is that the compliance and reporting which mechanism which is there once you come into the formal sector. So much time and effort is lost in there, and a lot of effort is being made to share information digitally across departments. I think one of the very good examples of that is the ease of filing your income tax returns today. You go there, you click on it, all your TDS records are there because the data is being shared. The data already exists with the government. Why should we have to recalculate and re-enter? We enter our data, they come back to us and say, "Nahi, this is not the amount of taxes, aapko itna aur dena hai," and the calculation is transparently in front of you. So this kind of ease of doing business should be there. Then people will not hesitate to come into the formal sector. The other side of it is that once you come into the formal sector, you appear on the radar of all the inspectors who will come and we need a handout or trouble you. So I think these are some of the reasons why people hesitate to become visible as part of the formal sector. The other side of this, and I think Mr. Subhash Aggarwal will bear me out on this, is, and a lot of bankers and financiers say this, if your data is not part of the formal sector, you're doing off-book transactions, how do you have a financial track record that would encourage somebody to give you money except by saying, please give your house as collateral? People want कि you look at my business plan, you look at my business record, but you have hidden your business record to save on taxes for whatever reason. अब आपका data तो है नहीं and you want a certain decision in your favor, it's not possible for anybody to do that. So I think these are all linked things. I think as we see that more ease of doing business and ease of reporting and compliance comes in, we hope that more people will feel encouraged to come into the formal sector, and that will provide the data to enable anybody to argue with the government, please take these next steps, they're necessary. So we have to work with the ease of doing business and the ease of compliance and the absence of inspections to encourage people to come to the formal sector.
I fully agree with you. In fact, there is a cost if one has to enter the organized sector. So that cost is much more than the benefit that one may get, and one is unlikely to enter into the organized sector. But
So
one
today,
issue perhaps that needs to be recognized is the steadily growing presence of small finance banks. Now we have more than 4,000 branches. Majority of them are concentrated in metros, cities, and semi-urban areas. In fact, according to the RBI statistics, only 18% of the small finance banks are confined to the rural areas. So given this, what role do they play actually in helping the MSME sector in general and unorganized sector in particular in their growth?
Sir, in this, I would like to mention that earlier today, one of the bankers pointed out that when you go to an NBFC or an informal borrowing, you're paying as much as 30% interest rate, 24%, 30% interest rate. And why are you going to them? Because you do not have a track record on which you can show to a banker to borrow. And the borrowing rate today for being an industry or mudra loans and so on is in the range of 8 to 10%. So you're paying 20% more interest. I think we must all consider, should we not just pay our taxes by declaring a fair income instead of paying 20%, instead of paying 30% interest? I think this is something which people should realize that yes, there is a benefit. ठीक है, come on record, pay your income tax, interest to bachega. It will offset some of the trouble which people anticipate.
But sir, the cost of borrowing in the informal market is much higher.
That's exactly the point I'm saying, that borrowing in the informal market is 24 to 30%, whereas in the formal market, it is as low as 8 to 10%. So is that not an incentive to become part of the formal sector?
Ashok, the issue over there is some of our members have been in the services sector. Now, when you go to a bank is still kind of tracking you on your plant, your machinery, your this and that as valuation for your business. Whereas now the services sector, they don't have anything. They have 2 computers, 4 chairs, and how do you justify a loan? It's working capital. It's you know it's so it's difficult for entrepreneurs to come and say, listen, we want a loan, but it's not. We don't have any plant and machinery. So that's one of the reasons why people are saying it doesn't matter.
May we have questions from the participants?
See, another aspect of that which is very strange is that if you want a bank loan, first you have to go and buy a movable property, for which let's say you pay 100 rupees. The bank will lend you 70 rupees or 75 rupees against that. If you had 75 rupees, why should you go and invest in immovable assets and put the 100 rupees into your business directly? So it's a very strange procedure which is being followed by the banks, which really needs to be addressed very seriously. That why are you going only for collateral-based lending? We are talking and trying to convince people that it should be cash flow based lending. And that comes back to the thing that cash flow based lending requires that you should have a couple of years of track record. And particularly for the service industry, which as Kenny's pointed out, that is absolutely the right way to go. Look at the track record and the financials, and particularly if a particular enterprise has been banking with a particular bank for, let us say, a period of 3 years. The bank has all the data, financial data, to know the profitability to make further investment. They don't need to look at what is your immovable assets which you're willing to mortgage to them. And that is something bankers really must look at.
I agree with Mr. Saigal, but the banks are not doing the way you are telling me. There is a complete mismatch.
There is a complete mismatch. I agree with Sandeep. There is a mismatch when it comes to the services sector.
Correct.
Collateral-based lending is not the way to go. There has to be, again, some sort of a policy decision saying that banks can lend based on cash flows or even projected cash flows. I don't know.
See, my MSME loan application was rejected because my March statement was not as per the earlier cash flow. It was lockdown. So how it can be as pre-lockdown? It has to be. It has come down. That's why I needed the loan. So it has to be clear that what government is saying, what bankers are asking for.
If there are no questions from the participants, may I hand it over to Professor Charan Singh to conclude the session? Before I would like to thank each and every panelist for bringing out very pertinent issues affecting different segments of the economy while giving due credit to the government for its appropriate responsiveness. Thank you very much, Professor Charan Singh.
I think there is a question. Madam, do you want to ask?
Yes, sir. I had one question. Since I have been studying entrepreneurs for last one decade at least, the problems that the entrepreneurs bring to the table haven't changed. The same problems with the policy, the same problem with access to finance, the same problem of funding R&D, the problems at least for last one decade since I'm studying them has not changed. Can there be an entrepreneurial approach to solving this problem, moving beyond lobbying the government organizations? Can entrepreneurs not think, entrepreneurially to solve these problems that we have been talking about for such a long time?
Professor Bala, would you like to tackle this question, because you are absolutely on top of it. You've done so much of work, and then we have the three. I think we have a very good panel today. Aggarwal ji, you yourself, Initial Association with SOCHM, CII, and then AIMO. I leave it to you how you want to take this question.
Yeah, can you repeat that question quickly? I did not hear it properly.
Bala sir, what I'm trying to ask is that the problems that entrepreneurs have been talking about are not new problems. These are very old problems. Their access to finance or difficulties in paying taxes with not very friendly policies. So I'm asking all the entrepreneurs that are present that can there not be an entrepreneurial solution to these problems? Are we just going to be waiting, or can entrepreneurs who know how to do business, have been innovative, creative, have not a creative solution to the institutional voids that we have been talking about, discussing over such a long period?
Can I answer this?
Yeah,
Prof?
please.
In fact, if you heard my presentation, basically that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to educate entrepreneurs. We're trying to take the initiative. We want entrepreneurs to come together. Now, what has happened is most of the trade bodies are all divas in their own small little pockets, whether it's Pina Industrial Association or some other industrial association. And then you have the big 3, 4, the ASSOCHAMs, the CIIs, the FICCIs, etc., who are actually led by big industry. There is actually a huge gap between the big industry and how the MSMEs are projected to the governments. So the MSMEs themselves need to come together and actually create solutions. And what we are attempting is actually attempting solutions, maybe in help with the government, but otherwise also we will go ahead and do it. Like I said, we're going to be running our own seminars. We're going to be running our own educational programs to entrepreneurs in terms of, like I said, whether it's marketing, branding, finance, whatever, people who don't have that knowledge. So we are taking the initiative on that side of us now.
Some of these institutional voids could be entrepreneurial opportunities themselves.
Sure. So one of the things we said was we will do a reserve bank, which is actually, create employment for people over the age of 50, 55, 60, where otherwise they won't be working, where they can come and mentor people. And this mentoring is for a fee. I might charge 1,000 rupees a day. Somebody will charge whatever X a day. But if I find your business interesting, I might even take equity in your business. So we are giving people to go back and actually reinvest their skills and knowledge. Will I trust a 60-year-old banker or a 20-year-old banker? 60-year-old banker any day. Will I trust, I'm saying experience comes with a lot of benefits and people discount it today. So that's the opportunity we're giving entrepreneurs.
Madam, I'd like to put in that where the change is coming is in the digitization of records and the availability of data. If you look 5 or 10 years ago, what the government understood by digitization was that instead of submitting a hard copy, you submitted a soft copy. The data linkage and data analysis was not there. I think over the last 3 or 4 years, we see an increasing use of data linkage and data analysis, which is what is making life easy. For instance, there is an increasing concept today in most applications which you have to make, where there is a timeline which is defined that the decision must be made in so many days. And because it is being made online and digitally, there is a timestamp on when you applied for it. And if there is an inordinate delay, it is on record and the person can be pulled up. The other side of this is that many such approvals, there is now a policy of deemed approval in case the decision is not given in X number of days. So this is a change which we have seen as an operating unit of ours, that about 6 months ago, I was asked to give feedback on what are the kind of inspections which we face. And I asked my admin manager, I said, what are the kind of inspections which you face, which you would like to see done away with? And he said, sir, the inspectors won't come anymore. So this is very encouraging, because what we have been promoting is that instead of the inspector coming and saying, okay, open your books, I'm going to inspect them, I'm going to audit them, the data is available. He can sit in his office, he can audit your income tax return, he can audit your GST returns. There's this great scheme which was announced 2.5 years or 3 years ago by the Prime Minister, 59-minute loan sanction. And Mr. Modi said, I'm saying 59 minutes because if I say 1 hour, 1 hour can become 2 hours. If I say 59 minutes, it's got to be done under 1 hour. And what they do is they say, please apply for your loan with your income tax return and your GST return. And an algorithm will analyze that by pulling out the data from those two departments and decide whether your business is worth giving a loan to or not. So this happens within 59 minutes. I mean, it's unimaginable. Online, you don't have to go and visit anybody. And once you've got the sanction, just yesterday you're talking to the public sector banks portal, which is running this. And what they said is that initially when this was started, about 3 months later, when we were asking our members, they said, well, we get the sanction within 59 minutes, but the disbursement takes anywhere from 2 to 3 months. At the end of 30 days, only 10% of the disbursements have actually taken place. So I asked for an update on this from this gentleman, and he said that now we say that 90% of the disbursements are being done within 10 days of the sanction. So within 59 minutes, you know you've got your loan sanctioned or not. So you're not hanging in the middle. And 10 days later, you have the cash in your account. What more can you want? So this kind of online services and digitization is what we have to, as all of us, become educated or be assisted by other people or organizations or tech centers, service centers as they're calling them. The common service centers is the program which they're making, where somebody sits with a computer in the same way that in the old days there were ISD booths and STD booths. And you go there and you say, this is what I want done. And he'll go online and he'll enter the data and it'll happen. Like today, so many people transfer money back to their homes. If you're finding a friend who's going back to the village to physically carry it, they go to the local outlet of the branch of the bank, which may be in the local market. Person takes the money, he charges you money for it, and next day it's in your village with your parents or whoever else you want to get it to. So digitization, I feel, is a major change which is happening and which will change the way when you're saying that things are not changing. I think this is the direction which we have to encourage and move in.
I really thank all the panelists. Thank you for the clarification. I hope we have answered the question of Professor Wasdani. It's 5:30 and I'm aware that Professor Bala has to join his other meeting at 5:30, which he changed just because I wanted him to. So I owe him a big thanks, and also that I need to let him go. So Professor Bala, I want to thank you profusely for agreeing to chair. And as you have seen the richness of the discussion that emerged, it was important that you are here because you are considered amongst the academic world to have done so much of research on MSMEs, guided so many students. The government respects you. I'm sure you have got quite a few inputs today, and in the budget discussions that you join, you will be able to provide them this. Exactly the same I feel with the others, that this discussion has been very open and transparent, very academic, and therefore you have inputs for the budget session, and I'm sure all of you get consulted by the finance minister. Please give in these inputs. I would now like to simply mention the last point, that next Friday, 3 to 4 p.m., we have Professor Bibek Debroy, the chairman of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, speaking to us. So I would, under the aegis of EGROW, I would invite each one of you to please join that discussion. I want to thank the participants and all the people who asked questions for their active participation in today's discussion. And with that, take care, enjoy your weekend, and we look forward to seeing you again next Friday.
Thank you.
To listen
Thank you.
to Professor Bibek
Thank
Debroy.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Bala. Thank you, Mr. Charan Singh, for very, very interesting session. Thank you, sir.
धन्यवाद.
Thank you.